The Last Boy Scout. There's a lot I can say about this one. I first viewed it when I was 14. There's no better age to watch any other movie at, quite plausibly. I mean, you don't need to consider it at all high art, although insofar as it becomes one of these die-hard mold Bruce Willis action flicks, The Last Boy Scout might be the best of them that isn't one of the actual die-hard features. Actually, it might be more sheerly minute-to-minute enjoyable than any of the die-hard sequels, in competition with 1995's With a Vengeance, it has to be mentioned. Tony Scott is a rather liked director at this moment in film discourse, so some enjoy championing his late 2000s ventures as elegant exemplars of what might be termed, and possibly slightly inaccurately, vulgar auteurism. I do think that Scott is a stellar film director, though I have quite mixed feelings about much of his output. He initially proved his skills on 1983's The Hunger, which, fairly sadly, remained his overall finest feature, though a marvellous work it is. And it wasn't until 1993's True Romance wherein his talents were applied sufficiently once moreover, though Last Boy Scout preceded it by 2 years. It was the Tarantino penned True Romance that really stood up amongst Scott's body of work. Last Boy Scout is incredibly cracking viewing, though it isn't a filmic zenith as 83's Hunger was, or as 93's True Romance was rather closer to reaching itself. Though most of its strength stemmed from Tarantino's screenplay, the performances and some story decisions really enunciate the events themselves. In the 2000s, our 21st century, it is 2004's Man on Fire, which is the most smashing of his work, I must say. I really wish he had not left us in 2012. It is a very miserable occurrence. I wish he was still present for his family and loved ones anywhere. The Last Boy Scout is indicative of a rather particular moment in time. Let me attempt to describe it. The cozy 90s, the edgy, violent, quippy action films of a down on their luck protagonist, as witty as he is good with his fists or a handgun, extraordinary and hilarious dialogue, prior to the greater complexities of the world unleashed during the 21st century, pre social media, pre internet generally, and occurring at a time just before I myself was born, and associated with a time I assumed to be more comfortable, whether because it was closer to when I was a very small child, or of a time wherein I assumed must have been more magical, as I didn't live to see it as and reduce it to something tangible. Having seen it at 14, it represented the punchy, action oriented, amusing, cheer inducive, enjoyable time which I really wanted to experience. You wanted to feel cooler than you were. You kind of wanted to be around in an earlier time, disheartened with the popular media around you at one time. Wished you could be wittier, better with your fists, and that the culture you absorbed would reflect on your supposed coolness in the world outside the screen. It reminds me of a slightly, sometimes I consider happier time, although that is for a set of factors which are rather bitter in of themselves. One is more ignorant and arrogant at that time, inconsiderate for how their brashness is affecting others. They assume things will just go their way, fall into their laps, or at least I had felt this way to some extent or other, and that life would play out like a fun movie. I really did essentially think that, even if it was at the back of my mind, rather. Over the next few years, the friends you made begin to become more miserable, more serious, concerned about certain adolescent priorities, and not excited to play fantasy or dream greater. All dejected and incredibly cynical. By the time you graduate, you realize that no one will ever like you just for existing, and that your loves and passions in life mean dirt to a majority of others, and that's okay. But you gotta find some way to exchange what you do have to offer with what other people want, whether that be your time and labor in exchange for a paycheck, your focus and attention on a project, hobby, artistic or otherwise, that won't get done by itself and excitedly daydreaming about for hours of a day, or you're finding a way to interact with others and not be insufferable or generally unbearable, so that some woman might actually deem you likable and maybe even dateable, and whatever the hell else that will entail. Different people will have different preferences of pace or commitment. Do insert your own ideals in this consideration. What do I bemoan if I am anything? You can't just be entertained by occasions of junk food, of visceral, violence laden entertainment anymore. It doesn't get you the girl. No one wants to like you for that in of itself. You need a series of paychecks to ensure you don't get kicked out of your place of residence. The amazing attributes of other works do not necessarily just magically filter into your own. You have to take some steps and create the work yourself. And or some social circles will ostracize you because you're just shamelessly being yourself and not trying to impress them, which they don't understand because they consider themselves better than everyone else for whatever painfully dumb reason their plutocrat parents imprinted in them. Now, I did what I had to do to ensure an absurd fortune in my life. I don't deserve some of what I am currently experiencing. That is overwhelmingly positive. But sometimes I still wish I didn't have to, because I can't help but feeling that the 14-year-old who loved the last Boy Scout excitedly, uncritically, is who I am deep down, and that no one could ever possibly love that guy unconditionally. Whoever I am now, I did extraordinarily well for myself, and I am immensely blessed. Yet I can't help but feel like generally resentful of how my enthusiasm was a boon upon my interactions with others, as their general bitterness and insecurities demanded that I take my surroundings more seriously or more dully, as they were all crushed by the undeniable pressures of real world, adult centric mundanity. I guess I just wanted to relax forever, but then I'd have nothing to look forward to instead of junk food, geeky media, or explicit materials displaying female bodies in all the glory they reverently deserve. Films like this one, Blade 2, Predators from 2010, the third one, I guess you could say, Big Trouble in Little China, and the Rodriguez film of Miller's Sin City, that's the ultimate in some respects, potentially. I'll never be convinced that those trying to stamp it out, that world of filmic enjoyment out, were doing so for the own weren't doing it for their own malignant, domineering reasons, and were far more aggressive, sinister, and bullying than anyone who happened to enjoy those films in their own private time, not seeking to afflict anyone else with what they might not have preferred. It was always the ones who objected who really wanted to control what people watch. Never, never, never the people who watched the material outside of the mainstream at all. We will live and let live. They were, no, you guys think you're better than us. You need to stop being like you are. And like them instead, because they were all projecting and they think they're better than all of us. There's nothing more value I could possibly add to this piece, and I'd best put it down mercifully, promptly.